Welcome to the Rich and Rob Show, everybody. I'm Rob. And I'm Rich. What have we got today, Rob? Well, Thomas Sowell, who is a genius, in my opinion, is talking about how education is approached in the black community in America today and compares it to other places in the world where slavery and hard times also existed. All right, let's get into it.
The average of black kid today, I think, is probably better off, certainly materially, than, say, Ben Carson was when he was growing up.
Ben Carson, the famous
Black
surgeon at Johns Hopkins.
Right.
Who is immensely accomplished in every way.
Yes.
Right.
I would say that certainly the black kids who are growing up today have a higher material standard of living than I had. The difference was that the schools were good when I came along. They were especially good in New York at that time, hard as that is to believe. But the kids who grew up in that same place where I lived, they will not get that same education. Now that can be blamed on somebody, but it has very little to do with what happened 100 or 200 years ago. And it's true in other countries. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, there's a tribe, the Igbos, who are living in one of the least fertile parts of Nigeria, who were in fact enslaved in centuries past by other tribes and so on. When the British moved in and set up schools, the Igbos went for the schools. By the time Nigeria became independent, the Igbos had climbed above the other groups that had been ahead of them to begin with. But there are all kinds of cross currents of factors. The particular culture or the particular geography, you run through the whole list of them.
You cite in Intellectuals and Race, you cite an observation by the intelligence expert, IQ scientist James Flynn, that just stopped me cold. After the Second World War, you've got large numbers of American troops remaining in Germany. For that matter, there's still several tens of thousands there today. And both black and white American soldiers had children with German women. And Flynn discovered that those children growing up in Germany showed no IQ differences at all. The black kids and the white kids, the same. Quoting Intellectuals and Race, Professor Flynn concluded that the reason was that the offspring of black soldiers in Germany, and now you're quoting Professor Flynn, grew up in a nation with no black subculture, close quote. Which means what? Which means they experienced exactly the same expectations. Is this
No. The expectations are external. The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which black kids grew up in America today.
So they had.
There's no gangster rap.
Rich, do you think he is saying that gangster rap is the cause of the decay in the black community and some white communities? No, not really. I think he is saying it has an influence, but it is more about the factors that bring about rap music in the first place. To be sure, gangster rap glorifies violence, and putting those thoughts in children's heads is not a good idea. But he's not saying that that is the reason things have gone wrong in the black community. Early rap, as I recall, was like the Fat Boys and Curtis Blow and Flavor Flav, and they were funny, entertaining. But then it changed. Music has a way of getting into our psyches, and if the messages are constantly that violence and distrust is the proper way to live, it will show up in the culture ingesting it. But I think his point was that the black subculture that produced gangster rap was already part of the black community. And in a vicious cycle, the music then contributed to the further deterioration of the community itself. Well, and in Germany, there was no such separation of cultures. And that is significant. There was one culture, German, and everybody did the same basically, no matter who they were, black, white, or otherwise. All right, let's get back to it.
That was pervasively available in Germany.
So here's what I'm getting. There is something about black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes. In fact, I went into this in a previous book on which about black rednecks and white liberals, because that same subculture.
Let's talk about two of your books here. Go ahead. Because
that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. that in the time this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both.
Whose job is it to say, wrong subculture, folks, you're harming yourselves?
Well, I would think in an ideal world that intellectuals might take on that task, but the world that we live in, I've noticed, is not ideal.
All right. What is to be done? Take a look at President Lyndon Johnson speaking at Howard University in 1965.
Oh, yes.
But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want and do as you desire and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair.
It's pathetic. It's not a question of, there's no you who has the control to be completely fair or completely unfair. I mean, the circumstances are, so someone once criticized the mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair. And I think it was David Reisman who said, the tests are not unfair. Life is unfair, and the tests are measuring the results. But who has control of life? Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
So Lyndon Johnson, he's in fact, although good liberal that he was, at least in regard, Lyndon Johnson had a complicated career and changed positions on issues many times. But good liberal though he was at that moment, he was in fact engaging in a breathtaking arrogance.
Yes.
On 2 counts. One, that white people were the ones who were responsible for where black people stood in the race, that it was up to whites entirely. That blacks, as he described, I'm
devastating.
Black people are passive; they're acted upon.
That's right. That's right.
And then the second act of arrogance is the supposition that somehow the federal government could fix it.
Yes, it is staggering. But if you wanted to be charitable, you could say, well, he said this in 1965. But if you say, all right, why are people now repeating it in 2013 when we've had nearly half a century of experience to the contrary? And if you look within the black community, those blacks who had escaped what I call the black redneck culture, they've moved on. So, but it's the culture the different parts of the black community had. They were different.
I have to say, I like the way he uses examples in history to show the Democratic Party's ideas and programs has been about treating black folks like they're stupid or incapable of excelling. To borrow from JFK's famous speech, if presidents and public people started saying, ask not what others can do for you, but what you could do for yourself, I think that would help people believe they can do things if they take advantage of what's already in place. Well, that's basically what my parents told me, and it worked for me. It clearly worked for Thomas Sowell, Ben Carson, Barack Obama, and others. All right, everybody, that does it for today's show. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rich and Rob Show. Cheers!